Welcome to another week of Cutthroat Commander. I'm your host Tim, and this week I'm featuring Thada, Adel, Inquisitor as my commander. For those of you who don't know, Thada, Adel, 2 blue, 1 colorless, 2/2 Island Walk. When it hits an opponent, you get to search their library, exile an artifact from it until end of turn. You can cast that artifact. As always, the deck list will be in the comments of the deck tech that goes along with this. I'll try and post it in the comments of this video as well. Thank you all, by the way, for the constructive feedback you offered. Because of that feedback, there are 2 changes. One is hopefully I fixed the microphone. And 2, I've decided at least this week to experiment with recording off of the replay rather than the live game. There are some downsides to that. It takes a little longer on my end, which isn't an issue, and you kind of lose the suspense of live game, quote unquote live gameplay. And finally, sometimes Magic Online's replay system doesn't work and you lose really good games and can't record them later. But the pros are pretty strong. For one thing, it gives me a lot more control over the quote unquote pace of the game. It allows me to stop and talk about certain key plays and why you might make decisions. It allows me to hover over cards and explain them with a little more consideration. And basically it avoids me having to divide my attention between gameplay and commentary. I can concentrate on playing a good game and then go back in later and explain myself rather than give up one or the other in terms of mental resources. Alright, so this round is Thada, Adel versus Zedruu the Great-Hearted. For those of you who don't know this, it's one of the original new commanders they put in the commander products. What does he do? He donates things. He, for red, white, blue, can donate a target permanent he controls to my control. And at the beginning of his upkeep, he draws X cards and X life depending on how many permanents he owns that I control. So, what you often see in these deck builds is, you can look at some lists out there. You see a control element and a combo element. The control element is these decks often play, the typical control cards, spot removal, sweepers, general answers, card draw, things like that, and slowly take over the game. And the fact that Zedruu offers a lot of card advantage helps greatly in keeping up with some of the other decks. The combo element is there are certain troublesome permanents that are great if you get rid of them. So one good example of this is Illusions of Grandeur. Illusions of Grandeur is a blue enchantment. When it comes into play, I think it's blue. Anyway, you gain 20 life. Then it has a cumulative upkeep. So Zedruu just donates the Illusions of Grandeur to the opponent. Eventually, I cannot pay the cumulative upkeep, and boom, I lose 20 life. Obviously, in constructed like standard, that was much more powerful because it just kills your opponent, but it's still strong here and gives you a huge life swing. There are other random permanents like that have detrimental effects to whoever owns them. There are also permanents that you get to play that you get some benefit from without actually having to own. So some of these decks play Hauling Mine type effects. It doesn't matter who owns the Hauling Mine. If you play some prisony or control permanents like Moat, it obviously doesn't matter whether you or your opponent owns the Moat, so you just hand that over and voila. Yeah, that's about it, especially since it's not a deck I play. I don't want to pretend I'm an expert on it. I just want to give you kind of a basic idea of what to expect out of the deck. As far as the matchup, this is a matchup I've played a few times. The pro of this matchup is that Thada Adel is playing a blue deck. While not guaranteed, there's a good chance he'll be laying down islands. Not all decks, however, do play Hollowed Fountain or Tundra or Prairie Stream. Some of them get by with, Vivid Lands, Reflecting Pools, Khans, Tri-Lands, Temples, etc. But he's not going to probably play a lot of early blockers. He is probably going to play a fair amount of spot removal, though. But anyway, yeah, playing a control deck is something this deck is reasonable at, and getting to hit with Island Walk is huge. It should, under most circumstances, allow me to build a heavy mana advantage. Second, on the con side, is I don't have much of a way of dealing with permanents that have been donated to me. I have three real bounce spells in my deck. One of which is Cyclonic Rift, which can't touch those because this only returns target non-land permanent that I don't control. So if it gets really out of hand, he donates a lot of permanents. Devastation Tide and Capsize are really my only options. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold here. Alright, so this particular hand, it's a keep, I guess. 2 lands and a cantrip is probably going to get me that third land. Future Sight is great in these kind of control-on-control grindy mirrors. Some mana ramp right there if I need it. All in all, it gets that Adel down on time, and that's good enough. Alright, so he just leads with Plateau. One thing you always wonder when you're playing against decks is to what degree they are deliberately sandbagging islands and to what degree they don't have them. Alright, so my first turn, I lead on Ponder. Sorry, I'm still getting the hang of Magic Online's replays, and I don't want to skip over something that I need later, because you can't go back in replays as far as I know. Alright, so I look at Ponder, and this has basically what I need. It has another land, it has a Mox Diamond that allows me to go turn 2 Thada Adel, and then it has Back to Basics, which in my original series, or video highlighting this format, I mentioned Back to Basics is normally banned in offline Dual Commander. However, in online, it's there, and yeah, it's powerful, especially against 3-color decks like this. So we definitely want to keep that. Alright, so it's important to remember that Back to Basics is on the bottom of that stack. Alright, here he plays Clifftopper Retreat, which is nice because it means I don't have to worry about a counterspell. But I do, of course, have to worry about spot removal. There's a chance he wouldn't have played that way if he has a blue source unless he has some sort of spot removal. So here, I'm going to Mox Diamond the Polluted Delta. And the reason for that is I do not want to shuffle away Back to Basics. Too many people crack fetch lands to thin their deck or other dubious reasons when you don't really need to. It still fuels the graveyard. If you're really looking to cast something like Treasure Cruise, obviously discarding Island and cracking Polluted Delta gets you more of a graveyard, but in this case I root that Back to Basics is worth more than a card in my graveyard. So Thada Adel lands. However, if my recollection is right, it gets bolted. Yes. Alright. So he has an open turn here. He just plays an island and passes. Alright. So here, I don't really have too much of a choice. I can throw out Back to Basics, but what I found is you really want to wait till he's tapped out with his non-basic lands to play that. Especially since all his white and red mana right now is in non-basic lands. White is going to be the color that removes Back to Basics. So here, I decide I want to hit my land drop, so I cast Snapcaster Mage and Ponder. And thankfully, he doesn't have a counter. Or at least chooses not to use a counter. Alright. So I draw the Strip Mine, and say go. And that's going to leave me with a couple awkward cards. Relic of Progenitus and Phyrexian Metamorph that I don't immediately have a good use for. He goes ahead and casts Zedruu the Greathearted. But other than the lands, he doesn't really have anything to donate yet. Alright, I go ahead and choose this window to cast Back to Basics, and then go ahead and strip mine his blue source. Alright, so he plays Homeward Path, a one-shot colorless land. Easy to play around. Homeward Path, in general, you want to avoid playing it until absolutely necessary, so you can have that surprise value. Alright, rather than chump with Snapcaster Mage, basic playing Magic well, use trade damage. Although I'm an idiot and just click through my attack step. Alright, Relic of Progenitus, not going to do a whole lot in this game. He's not very graveyard based. Lightning Greaves, however, I consider here bouncing the Zedruu, but that card really isn't problematic yet. He doesn't really have anything to donate, and I definitely might want the Cyclonic Rift later when I can overload it. So I take the damage and pop the Relic, and voila, another land. Alright, so here I have a choice. I can cast Thran Dynamo, or I can hold up both Negate and Cyclonic Rift. First, I punt that decision by just simply attacking first, and then decide what's the worst he can do with 3, maybe 4 mana. So off goes Thran Dynamo. And if he does play something absolutely insane with the 4 mana, I would have Cyclonic Rift backup. Alright, so he has another non-basic land that he gets one shot out of. And I draw Mind Stone. Here, I play Metamorph. I feel like this is a mistake. I probably... Oh, so first he plays Ojutai's Command, and if that was just a normal counterspell, I would have let it resolve, but I don't want him cycling, and so I go ahead and negate that. Alright, now here's the error. I could have copied Thran Dynamo, gotten even more mana, but instead I decide to just stem his attacking, so I name Zedruu, which I think is probably a mistake in hindsight. But, you know, I swing in with Snapcaster Mage. The problem with this is it just creates a standoff. I can't even get more damage in because he can just sit back with Zedruu. Alright, and here he has Valorous Stance. So that Metamorph was really underutilized, and was probably my first big mistake of the game. Alright, now I draw Capsize, which endgame-wise is an extremely powerful card for those of you who have ever had to play against it, particularly if he's locked down vis-a-vis basic land, non-basic lands. Because what it can start allowing me to do when I get enough mana is pushing his basic lands back to his hand faster than he can play them. It also can save that back to basics, and it's also a key tool for getting rid of donated items. For now, though, I just cast Temporal Mastery for an opportunity to just try and draw and get through my deck. There are times when casting Temporal Mastery or Time Walk effects is better. A lot of times, though, I just choose, when I don't have anything else going on, to cycle some of these cards. Here I put out Thawing Glaciers like an idiot, because it's not going to do anything right now. And cast Future Sight, and then Soul Ring was on top. And then Mind Stone. Alright. So this is where the game starts to go off the rails for my opponent, because now, even if he has some sort of enchantment removal, he's probably only going to have a spot removal spell. He probably is not going to have enough mana to cast some sort of universal sweeper on enchantments and artifacts. And his choices are now getting a little overloaded. Back to basics is what he probably almost has to hit, but that involves leaving Future Sight alive. And then similarly, he can't even think about right now until he gets rid of those two, smashing these artifacts if he has the choice, like with a disenchant effect. Alright, it's one thing to notice, he's a little constrained on mana now, but these lands all of a sudden, if he can't get rid of back to basics, are things he can donate to me that will draw him a bunch of cards while being useless. There he has to take the 2 mana to get any use out of Hallowed Fountain. And at this point I gotta be careful. I have already taken 10 damage from his commander, so I can't just take chip shots from that forever. I draw Cage Sun. I play Worn Power Stone off the top of my library, play Scalding Tarn. I probably should have kept and played that Propaganda off the top in hindsight, but at the time I remember looking for a much more high impact spell. And although it doesn't look high impact, Trinket Mage actually serves an important purpose. And what is that? Now I can just sit back and he can't attack with Zedruu unless he has a plan, essentially. So with Trinket Mage, I grab Top, which works out real well with Future Sight in case you've never tried it. I don't know why this window all of a sudden got so huge, but there you go. I'm just going to sit on these defenders, prevent Zedruu from coming in. Alright, that's unfortunate. He now has 1 basic land of each type, so he can start donating things without cost. He casts for C here, and I could in theory do something about this, maybe if I top, but I decide that I really don't care about that. He can have 20 cards in his hand. The chokehold is going to be his mana rather than his number of cards in hand. As I said, I do have a capsize to take care of any removal on the backed basics. Alright, so I top here. Treasure Cruise is a fine draw, but my graveyard is not particularly packed. Temple of the False God is okay as a one-shot of mana, but it is a free card off the top of my library, so I go ahead and put that on top of Tezzeret. That allows me to play that. Then I cast Tezzeret. Then I untap the Thran Dynamo, and I think it was the Mind Stone. And then I go ahead and cast Caged Sun, which honestly at this point is a little more useful for its pump effect on the Snapcaster and Trinket Mage. And here I decided to just kind of keep the limited shields up rather than cast that Treasure Cruise. Alright, so he grabs Soul Ring, so he's starting to pull out of his Mana Glut, another basic land. So now I decide it's probably time to start closing out this game. Island off the top is nice. I cast Treasure Cruise using the massive mana boost from Tezzeret. And also here I'm seeing that my likely end game is going to be stampeding with these artifacts. I've already got 7 artifacts in play, which is enough to just kill him outright, unless he has some sort of removal spell. Alright, but I get lucky. After that Treasure Cruise, I have a Time Walk effect on top of my library, followed by another Time Walk effect on top of my library. So I go ahead and cast Jace just to really pile it on. And this is going to be game. Here's where my opponent starts realizing, oh, I can donate these lands for free. But it really doesn't matter because I activate Tezzeret's ultimate and just swing with all my artifacts. Alright, so there's a couple lessons from this game. The first is that Back to Basics is banned in actual paper Commander for a reason. But then again, so is Soul Ring, and everyone plays that online. I would like to say that I would be pretty happy if Magic Online implemented the French ban list in 1v1 games, like if it gave you that option with the rule changes for that. Unfortunately, I don't see that happening anytime soon. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, there's not a lot you can do about that. You can not play banned cards, but unfortunately your opponents almost certainly are. Virtually every deck out there is going to be playing Sol Ring, and most players online that play consistently are probably packing Mana Vault and Mana Crypt as well. Virtually every black deck, Vampiric Tutor is cheap enough online that most black decks are going to play it. Even Imperial Seal is only, I believe, a few dollars online rather than the $800 in real life, so people are going to play that. In other colors, people play all manner of nonsense that's normally banned. So yeah, there's not a lot you can do about it, other than just join the club and accept this is a degenerate format and go with it. Obviously, there will be games that suck, and one of the reasons I don't stream is no one wants to see games where one side goes turn 1 Island, Mox Diamond, Sol Ring into Mana Vault into Tameo, lock down your land, follow up with whatever nonsense. Like, those games just aren't very interesting. But anyway, as I was saying, lessons learned from this game. Back to basics is a stupid card, is the main lesson. Other than that, this does illustrate the power of Future Sight unanswered. I mean, that drew me probably 7-8 extra cards over the course of this game, especially when you start combining it with Sensei's Divining Top. One change I did realize during this game that I would consider is maybe changing a Trinket Mage to Fabricate. And the reason for that, now that I'm musing out loud, is A, they get you all the same mana rocks. Fabricate has the ability to grab other artifacts with possibly a higher impact on the game. And the real one I'm thinking about is Vidalcan Shackles, but even something like a Gilded Lotus might be more useful than a Sol Ring. You might need colored mana. You might just want to ramp up the maximum extent possible. Whereas Trinket Mage, all you get off of it is a 2/2 body, which in the grand scheme of things is just not that important. It was nice this game to have a second blocker to keep his Zedruu off our back, but most of the time I'm thinking, now that I'm looking at this, that Fabricate would be a pretty big upgrade. And part of tuning decks is kind of realizing where you can squeeze out more value at the margins. Is a 2/2 body worth more, or is being able to tutor for absolutely any artifact in your deck worth more? Anyway, hopefully this game was enjoyable and instructive. I'm still experimenting with this replay system, so just let me know what you think. Have a good day.